I got my teacher here. You want to say hi? Yeah, it could be the whole world right there. Yeah, but they're all very interested in your teachings. Yeah, well, they certainly need them, that's true. They might not be interested, but they need them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being here again, Mr. Buddy. Thank you, Sifusaki. There he goes. Good job. I'm just giving it a moment in case anybody joins in. And then we'll start. Limited time today, I believe. I'm gonna check out my own feed on my phone. And we'll see if we can share it a bit, and then we'll start. I got a little bit of chai tea, a gift from Darcy from class earlier. And we'll set that down. I'm going to just kind of find a level-ish bit here. It's maybe close. I don't know how well you can see my feet though. Maybe further back. All right, that'll have to do. That's level-ish. And we'll see who we need to invite this to. Apparently we're on 720 video quality. So we'll share it there. Yeah, that's good enough. Share it with a couple spots. And that's about all I can do. And working on doing these every day. So I don't know how much time we'll have for today. So we'll start with some stretching and review, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with the feet together, repeat a stretch we did in our earlier standing class. And that is to drive the knees forward, which of course will bend them, and not have my torso chase, and don't have your chest chase, don't have your butt go back. Butt goes down, knees go forward, tracking with the feet, as we talk about a lot in stance training. When I say tracking from the knees, I mean heel to toe creates a line, and in my case, that's a south line. And so as I bend, my femurs point in the same direction as my feet. My knees head in the direction of my feet, toes. Of course, my knees don't go beyond the balls of the feet, certainly not beyond the balls of the feet, and then continuing beyond the toes. Maybe you can hear Saki tramping through where the rabbit hole is. Hey buddy, what'd you find? It's too early for baby bunnies. Yeah, a couple more months. Okay? So I'll just come up again and re-sink. So knees forward, tail down. And I'm also trying to have my knees come together, my thighs come together. There he is. So here, and then up, and then down. Well, a nice little bit of training here, not that I have a clock with me, is to come down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come up, 1, 2, 3, come down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, come up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come down. I got to 20 this time. So what I'm doing is I'm counting I'm doubling my count each time I'm down, and each time I come up, I'm doing half of that count. So when I finish this 20, I'll come up and rest for 10, which I'm coming up now. 1, 2, 3. Up means legs straight, but they're not locked. Good, I'm down. So now I'm going to try and do 40. of course I'm sure I'll lose count on because I'm talking to you. Whenever the count, the half count is an odd number, or a partial number like 7.5. If you need a little more rest, make it 8. If you feel up for it, make it 7 count, and that's about half of your, if you were doing 15. I'm guessing I'm about 26 here. And then up for 20. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, you look pretty energized. You got lots to patrol, don't you? Yeah. Here he comes. And down. So of course you can go as much as you like. You can certainly just repeat this without the doubling, or you can double until you get to the point at which, okay, that's a pretty good number for me, 20 down, 10 up, for example, and then maybe repeat that a time or 2 or 3 if you can repeat it but not continue to increase it. I had a teacher do a version of this where we double until we reached our number. Then he'd have us double it again and repeat that. Like, that's how we found our number. But that was an awful lot of sweat and frustration, I guess. And come up. So down, there's the tracking. Now I want to turn with the belly button and keep the knees tracking, keep the thighs together. Turn the belly button. So I'm asking for a stretch, perhaps from the buttock, but certainly the small of the back to the mid-back, and then back. Turn the other side. Just the belly button. Try not to turn the chest and the head and make you, to give you the sense that you've turned a lot. Here I feel like I've turned a lot. I'm looking at the pond. The practice is turn the belly button, keep the thighs where they were, to look for that stretch. Good. So usually what I'll do with this is I'll sink and I'll twist, return, come up if you need, sink, turn, come back, up if you need, sink, turn, return. If I don't need to come up, just turn from side to side. If you can do that okay, then turning from side to side and hold for a breath count. Release, turn, hold for a complete inhalation and exhalation. So we'll come up. Good. So this is just a little bit of single-legged practice now. So I have my weight on one foot. This foot's behind me. If this foot's behind me fairly narrow, it's an additional challenge to my balance. Although if I have a stable chair or counter or the like, I might be able to do that and assign some of the balance work that I might need to something external. But as a general rule, we don't want to do that unless we really do have to. And if we do have to, then there's no hit to the ego, no shame. So I have this behind me. If it's a little bit wider, it's a little bit easier to be stable. Good. I know it's an empty stance, but we're not doing cat stance yet. Yeah, it's just an empty stance. Do you need to adjust my feet at all? Yeah? Okay. Here's our empty cat stance like this. Right, you just rest the ball of the foot on the closest available cat, but careful not to disturb them. There we go. So I have the weight on the front leg. That knee is bent. That means that femur is tracking with the foot, in this case for me pointing east. And this foot is pretty empty, and I'm going to circle this foot. And what I'm looking to do is to roll the toes. So my toenails are down, and then my toenails are up, and my toenails are down, and my toenails are up. And I'm looking to experience this stretch or movement, expression through a range of movement of the joint or joints from my hip into my knee, to my ankle, instep toes. You want some chai? You can have a sip if you want. There he goes. Good. This is my quarantine partner. We'll do the other side. A bunch of sticks here. Good. And compost. Hey, buddy. So a lot of times in these single weighted with the foot back, people will kind of rooster with their chest forward. They may certainly sort of cantilever and lean. So check out how you're standing on one leg. Try and use the horizon as a guide to give you some feedback about your verticality in your spine, your posture, your alignment with gravity. We're going to go for a walk in a little while, okay? Yeah. I have a good walk in mind. And then I have a bunch of classes. And you can rest inside then if you want. And of course I'm going in the other direction. Having done one direction, I'm going to go in the other. If you have questions or comments, something you'd like to see, maybe a different angle, please type it in. Good. So that's a nice little check in with the condition of the joints, get some circulation, bring them through a little bit of range of motion, get the synovial fluid going. So I'm going to just practice now. We're going to practice this way that we did the other day. So a little bit wider, maybe 1.5 times the width of my shoulders or hips, maybe something like that. I'm not quite into this stance, but I'm certainly not into the very wide and low horse stance. And I'm going to open my feet 30, 45 degrees. That means, of course, that when my femurs shift onto a leg, they're going to track in that new direction. Even though I'm facing south, this femur is going to track to the southwest. This will track to the southeast. So I'm going to sink. Again, as we've talked about, the sink here might just be a couple inches, and that's perfectly fine. Good. Track. Feel my center position. Track. Feel my center position. Track. Come back to center. Track. Come back to center. If this is where you need to take a break and straighten and come up a little, or adjust that, if I'm down 5 inches, I want to adjust to just 3 inches. Great. If I just want to take a break and then go back to it, that's fine. Certainly, if you have some capability here, flexibility, strength, and endurance, you can do this whole thing wider, deeper, lower, slower. But this is just a little bit of leg strengthening and a whole lot of blazing the trail of the consciousness into that tracking of the femur with every weight shift. I'm kind of familiar with that recipe. This is my recipe for shifting, which is something that happens when I'm stepping all the time. So if I cook this recipe enough, I can really own it in my mind. I don't have to refer to the notes, and I certainly don't skip steps. I know that, when I cook something, I'm reading the recipe all the way through. I'm reading the recipe as I go, reading just ahead of where I am as I go, double checking certain things, going through the mise en place ahead of time if I can. And I'm sure that the professional baker who cooks the same croissants every day or whatever they cook, why not think about croissants? That's nice. They just have that recipe in their mind and they make it every day, and they know 18 ounces of this, 3 tablespoons of that, half teaspoon of this, and so forth. And they know that recipe so well, they don't even feel like they're double checking it. They just know. And I'd like to be there in terms of shifting drills, stepping drills, balance drills. And this here could be just enough to get you tired. Okay. So we'll come back in and we'll practice horse stance. Maybe about here. So again, just sinking just a bit. Notice that I've just come just a tiny bit. You have more in you, do a little more. The whole idea of this series is not to have an ego, not to have our ego, or invite or remind our ego, give our ego permission to drag our bodies into any extremis. That's the general idea here. The real basics. I'm going to check in and see if there's comments or questions here. My guess, probably not. I'm scrolling through looking, rather not be on the phone. Actually, nice to By the way, we have an 11 a.m. Eastern class on standing, and we did that earlier today. Maybe 3 hours ago we finished, and a half hour every week of practicing standing. Maybe slightly more involved than this, but that's okay. Invite you to check it out live. It's free in-person class. That's free to my Patreon members. And there's a small fee for live Zoom attendees who are not Patreon members. Quite often, I think regularly, I think every single time, we've collected cash and non-perishables from people here that are here in person attending the free class that we can donate to those in need locally. So here's my horse stance. Checking in that you haven't had a fold in the front at the waistline. In other words, the chest hasn't tipped forward. If you were precisely at noon, the sun directly overhead, the chest should not cast a shadow on the belly. Right? The chest casts a shadow that envelops the feet. Or shoulder girdle, shoulders, the upper jowl, the region, the top of the torso. Good, so I think we did crouch stance was the second stance we did. So we're going to shift to one leg. That means paying attention to that tracking, which has already begun because we were sharing weight on that leg. I'm going to open this foot by pivoting the heel and shift onto that. And then we're sinking there. And I'm going to just make myself a little bit wider for this one. But if that's where you are, you can just be here and practice that drop stance or crouch stance or pugu. But I want to just, for me, be a little bit wider here. So shift, tracking the knee. Both of the feet stay flat. That means they don't roll. The heel doesn't lift. The toe doesn't lift. And once I'm in this position, same idea. My shoulders cast a shadow, directly beneath me, not in front of me. Very easy here as we sink to kind of want to tip forward. If I was purely doing a stretch here, I might want to do that. And maybe we'll transition into a little bit of stretching from this for the adductors and the hip. But bending the knee, that I'm weighted on. If the other one bends a bit, that's okay. It may very likely bend if you're not in a wide stance. But I'm carrying my weight on this open foot. Come up, shift, turn, shift to the recently turned foot, open the unweighted foot, shift, adjust your pants so you can sink. dragon twining striking, the black dragon technique yesterday. So you can certainly be playing with that as well as you work through that practice. Well, I thought I'd just do a review of the basic stance instead of all our variations and additions. I imagine if we keep this series going, we'll do all kinds of variations, probably of each of the stances. There's a number of different ways to do these stances. I'm aiming to do a simple to convey over Zoom or Facebook Live or whatever this is. So that's what I'm aiming to do, and a relatively accessible version of the stance for everybody. Good. Then we had our cat stance, so we're going to chimney out, especially if we were pretty wide, if you didn't find yourself very wide. And you can just keep yourself vertical and shift to one leg, and then reset your feet where you like. That's going to be perfectly fine. So here's my cat. So the femur is still tracking on both. Of course, the one that tracks, that's most important to track for your health is the foundation one always, but I can certainly work on tracking this other one as well. Interestingly, if you have a challenge not having your knees collapse in and kind of needing to reset your, if you're kind of here and you're working this way to correct things, a lot of times for people with that can kind of, when they do that, throw their butt out, sort of change that lordosis in the small of the spine. So we don't want to just kind of recklessly push the thighs apart. I want to pay attention to the tailbone, the buttocks, the lower back, and make sure that those are a nice support for the rest of my spine that'll be vertically stacked atop that. Feels like it's low 40s, quite overcast, but like no breeze. It's really kind of nice tonight. Not a real challenge out here, or this afternoon. I don't know why I said tonight. Hi, Sifu Aliyah. Hello. Now I feel the pressure, the spirit of Peter Kwok looking at me and telling me how bad my stance is. Right? Maybe I need to, work on some Xingyi or something and keep Randy happy to see me. Good to see you. I hope that you're in good health and you've had a great winemaking season. And then we'll just turn it. We did a couple versions here when we went from 90 to 30 to 60. You can do 90 to 45, back to 90, anything, or you can find the one that you like best or need most and work on that. I just went from 90 to 45 here because I don't want to take forever to review everything that we've done. I'm reviewing the cat stance, which we did, but we're not spending the in-depth cat stance time here. And remember here, the invitation isn't to get as low as you can and hold it as long as you can and do all the upper arm jing that you know. It's just to do the very basics. Can I get to know my principles? Can I learn to speak their language? Can I learn to value them? Can I learn to recognize them? Can I learn to recognize when I shift outside of their purview, I guess, their jurisdiction. I had a teacher that talked about, your principles are your real teacher, not me. And doing this at the super basic level is about meeting the principles. When the ego is involved, we forget principles, and we certainly find it harder to pay attention to principles. And so if you got into this and said, as long as we're doing this silly basic thing that Steve is doing, I'm going to work on, my you know, whatever your other moves are. Or if you said, let me do it twice as long, or 4 times as deep, or you know, twice the intensity, or half the speed, you're inviting your ego into the arena, and that's probably going to get your attention, not the principles. So I'm purposely doing this in this whole series, just barely sat in, and not trying to do a very long practice. Try this on the other side. I'll start more towards camera this time, so I'm at my 30, I guess, for this one. So my femur tracks. I feel my tailbone below me, not behind me. I feel the spine vertical. I feel this, the ball of the foot just kind of resting lightly on the ground. If I need somewhere to put my hands, I kind of like to rest them on one of my sensors, or a few of my sensors. This can often help me just kind of remember my breathing, remember my center. Gives me something to do with them that feels a little functional, but very simple, not a challenge. And it can be comforting too. Now I'm going to open this up. I guess I'll just go to the 45, I guess, or to the 60 maybe. So 2/3 of the way from straight ahead front. And in this position, I can face to the front, but ordinarily with the cat stance, we're going to kind of face in the direction of the unweighted leg, or nearly face it. You know, if you want more of a stretch here, or in a particular application, you might look more like this. But by and large, you'll be facing the unweighted foot, or nearly. So I'm going to work on having myself face the 45, but my foot is a little bit more to my left at 60. Right? You know, in a form, I might have my head match my femur and my arms, so that my body's bladed a bit towards the direction I'm facing. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll introduce another stance here, because I think that's what we covered. We did horse, crouch, or drop, and cat. So we're going to do a back stance here. And what I want to do is have a sense of a line. So I'll do it this way. In this case, it's my north-south line, and that's the line that I have my heels on. Every good stance should keep you in reach of your tee. This tee was a gift from a student during an earlier class, so that's quite nice. So, again, like when we did that sort of Cossack stretch for the adductor, I'm going to have my feet about half, again, the width that I had on that simple horse stance. Right? Certainly, this, like all of these, this could be done wider and deeper, but just a bit here. I'm going to shift to one leg, and for me, I'll shift to my left, just like we did with the horse stance. And that means I track my femur in the direction described by my heel and toe on my weighted leg. So the line between my heel and toes is east-west, so my femur is heading, in this case, heading east-west. My kneecap moved towards the east. You know, the trochanter side is facing west. So I'm in alignment there. Now I want to keep that alignment, and the next thing I'll do is give a little bit of a challenge to that, and that is to turn this leg, the whole leg, that's why I point to the hip, in the direction of the camera. But that simple turn can be enough to invite this femur to collapse inward to the arch side of the foundation foot. So I still have this idea of heading towards the pond, heading towards the east with this upper leg, and this leg is turned 90 degrees. When you're in this position, you can turn to face, you can partly face, less partly face, or I don't think you see this too often, but fully face that direction. So I'm going to be somewhere in the middle for now. And this is one way to do what we call a back stance. So a back stance will support me coming to the front leg. So I've just shifted my weight, tracking this knee, and shifted my weight, tracking that knee. So a back stance will support me coming to this front leg, the leg that in the direction I'm facing, somewhere in the middle, and most often in the rear, primarily in the rear. So largely rear weighted, or anywhere from largely to fully rear weighted. So while it's fully rear weighted in many cases, it's not an empty stance where I have this foot sort of floating like we did in the cat stance. Although we might make an argument that's empty if it's empty of weight, even if it's flat on the ground. But generally the back stance will have enough distance between the foot that when I'm fully back, this foot doesn't want to pick up quite so easily without kind of hinging me. That's a little bit far to comfortably do that. Here, it's a little bit easier because if my knee comes up from this point, right, that's much more challenging than if my knee rises from here. So there's my back stance. I guess I've turned now. And like we did in that drop stance, once you're sinking into this, you can think in terms of your hamstring moving towards your calf, your tailbone dropping, shoulder over the pelvis, pelvis supported by the feet beneath it, not just beneath it and sort of off to the side, but beneath it in a supportive way. So we can try the other side. Here. Feels so weird to me to just keep the hands down. like I want to be, you know, holding a spear or something like that. But here we are, just a little bit of a sink, all the weight here, or almost all the weight here. I'm going to just check in. Yeah, I don't see any comments. I wonder if I can get Facebook to turn off comments for different things. So I just have my hand on my inner thigh here, just to practice. This is what I might give somebody that has trouble with this, to give somebody that reminder of not letting that collapse in. I'm not really pushing it outward. The cause of the knot collapse is not my arm. This is just the reminder. Good. So we can shift and sink. And if we have a wider stance and we sink and we continue to track that, we're not leaning, I'm just sinking. And if you want a little bit more fun, you can make sure that your unweighted knee doesn't collapse inward as you sink, or the chest doesn't tip forward as you sink. So there's our back stance. And I think we'll just transition this into a little Cossack squat. So you can switch sides if you want. I think I just did, so I'll leave it. So in this position, the weight's on the rear. I'm aware of the tracking. I want to lift this toe and then drop the tail so that I feel like I'm going to lay the back of this calf and thigh along the ground, which might be a long way away for some of us, and that's okay. But the idea here is that as I sink, I guess I'll go a little wider so I can, as I sink, the back side of this leg is lowering towards the ground, right? To stretch those adductors. As we do that, that's a little bit better distance to stretch those adductors and work that hip strength and mobility as we go. So the reason I bought the chair is that we can practice that same stretch here. So I'm kind of at the edge of the chair a little bit, and I'm reaching the back of the leg towards the ground. Of course, I'm not going to do this with external force because the butt is going to stop my leg, the upper leg, from getting close to the floor, but the knee may still want to go, and I get a little challenge to my knee joint by having it come beyond straight. So I don't want to be physically pushing here. My hand is just giving you a sense of what my mind is doing. I'm inviting the back of that leg down. And since I'm right on the edge and I have some support on a stable chair, I can reach that down and get that stretch. We had a teacher where we were, I think it was in Japan, I don't remember, but it's weird that I can't remember, but we would sink down into a similar stance, not quite this one, but a similar stance, and you'd take a seat, so you'd kind of perch your sit bones on something, and then stand right up without lurching, without leaning, without grunting, and certainly without using your hands. So you'd come into this seated position, and then instead of I'm up, you'd be in the seated position, and then just from there come up in the leg. So one way to work with the chair on these. So here's my squat, sort of single leg squat, not quite a pistol squat, single leg squat. This can be done with my torso turning and then folding towards it, untwisted folding. And I can do this with my torso facing the direction of my foundation leg and dipping a shoulder. So I'm reaching the back side of this leg to the ground and reaching the side of the body towards the top of the leg. So getting this stretch or getting this stretch. But remember, we talk about the tracking of the knee. When I'm interested in this stretch, I don't collapse this to get it. That stays true, that's a principle. And that kind of turning is the same thing we did when we did our little warm-up. So there's a little back stance, a little cat stance, drop stance, horse stance, some stretches. And I probably have to teach a paying student now. And my Saki teacher's here. Hi, Robert. Hello. Hello, John. Hey, Mr. Stolzman. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Robert. Hello.
And Gwen is back. Hooray. Thank you. Thank you. Bob is there. Steven's all right. I didn't see who else was watching on my phone. I don't know why. But anyway, once again, no questions. So maybe that's the last time I ask. Thank you all. With any luck, we'll be doing this tomorrow.